Tina Beard with the Plainfield Public Library. Today is May 30th, 2009, and I'm conducting an oral history for the Library of Congress with John E. Bright, who is a sergeant in the Army Air Corps. Mr. Bright, for the Library of Congress, can you state your name, your date of birth, and place of birth?
Yes, John E. Bright, and I was born in Greenville, Pennsylvania on December 27th, 1925.
Before you decided that you were going to join the service, tell me a little bit about your background, your parents, maybe your brothers and sisters, what life was like in Greenville?
Greenville is a small village about halfway between Pittsburgh and Erie, Pennsylvania, in the western part of the state. And small town, I think we had maybe 9,000 people then. And it was, we'd spend, an evening would be neat, sitting on the front porch counting the cars going by, up on Main Street. And I was the youngest of 4 kids. And I had my oldest was my sister Betty, and then my brother Bud was next, and then Pat, my other sister, and then myself. So there was 5 years difference between myself and my youngest sister. So I was sort of a loner in those days. But, it was a typical small town I was brought up in. And my dad owned a local business. And so we were like very middle class. We didn't have a lot of money, but everything was family oriented then. We all ate meals at the same time and so forth, and spent a lot of time together. I'll never forget, I guess, when December 7th, 1941, when Roosevelt announced on the radio about Pearl Harbor. We were all gathered around the radio in the living room. Didn't have TV then, listening to that, and it was such a horrible feeling about so many of our guys getting killed. I wanted to get in the service right then and get after those guys, kind of thing. And so I was always interested in flying, and they just formed an organization called the CAP, which is still active today, I think. It's the Civil Air Patrol. So I joined that and learned a lot about flying because I wanted to be a pilot. And I got to fly, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times in a little Piper Cub, which is sort of neat for somebody that age. I was 17 years old then. And then I made the decision to join, to enlist in the Air Corps because I wanted to be a pilot, fighter pilot. Mm-hmm. And so I did, and just waited to be called.
You mentioned you had an older brother. Did he enlist or was drafted?
Yeah, he enlisted in the service in the Army, and he was in the Signal Corps in the U.S. Army. He never went overseas or anything. He ended up being a real interesting deal. He was stationed at the White House in Washington, D.C. with communications. I guess they took care of all the communication system in the Pentagon and in the White House. So he spent all of his time in Washington. But he was 11 years older than I was.
Oh. Now, you have a military history in your family. You had mentioned earlier to me that your father served as well.
My dad was in the Spanish-American War. Mm-hmm. And he never talked much about it. I don't think he ever had an involvement in combat. But, he was on the fortifications of Washington, D.C. then, the time he was in. And he still got, even up until he died, he got $20 a month pension from the Spanish-American War.
And that was good money back then.
Yeah, it was pretty good money then.
Now, when you enlisted and they finally called you and let you know that you were going to be entering into the service, where did you go?
I got on a train in Greenville and went to New Cumberland, Pennsylvania. And then that's, I think it's east of Harrisburg in the central part of the state. And then from there I was inducted. You got all your shots and all that stuff. And got on another train and went to Biloxi, Mississippi, to Keesler Field for basic training. And that was interesting. All the guys there were all in a pilot program, and we couldn't figure out why we had to go through all the stuff with M1 rifles and bivouacs and in the swamps and all that kind of stuff. A lot of physical training and so forth. But
Was this the first time you had ever been away from home?
away from my family, yeah. I've been, when I was a kid, I went to Florida. My dad, after he retired, we went to Florida every winter, and just in time for me to start school. Let's see, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. I went to school in Florida, and then when school was out, we'd come back home. But other than that, I'd never traveled anyplace. This is the first time.
What was basic training like for you? What did you do on a typical day?
Oh, they had a lot of physical activity that you had to go through, strengthening exercises and just all kinds of stuff like that. And weapon training to some degree on rifles. And we trained a lot just like we were going to be infantrymen. And I'll never forget one time we went out on I forget what they call it, but there were 4 of us. They put us on a truck, and we had stuff to keep us overnight and everything out in the bush. And they drove us maybe 10 miles out into the middle of nowhere and dumped us off. And we had to, and it was like 8 o'clock at night, so it was dark, just about dark. And we had to work our way we had a map and everything. We didn't know which way we were going because they blindfolded us when we left and dumped us off. And then we had to find our way back into the camp and get back in safely because it was guarded. Try to get by the guards. So anyway, they dump us off and we take off, and by a very short time it was pitch black, no lights, anything anywhere. And we managed, we had flashlights and so forth, so we managed to, this one guy was pretty good about directions, and he knew which way to go from reading the map and so forth. So we decided we were going to go through this heavy swamp because that entrance into the way the map showed it, we figured there wouldn't be anybody ever watching guarding that area because nobody would be stupid enough to go through this muddy swamp. So we went that way, and we were up to our waists in muck. And of course there were snakes and everything else in there probably, we didn't see them, it was so dark. But we got through all this gook, and it was really very uncomfortable and hot. It was like 85 degrees at night. And we finally get out of it, and we're walking up this little bank to where the road was to go into which meant we would be in the camp and have successfully evaded the guards, which is the objective. So we got up off this little bank, and we're wiping all the gook and stuff off of us, and about 5 guys grabbed us, So it was, sort of funny in retrospect because we'd gone through all this to try to avoid them, and we were the ones that got caught. We found out later that several guys went through this main area that you even have a path that got in and didn't get caught. So that's a type of thing we went through for, gosh, I don't know, 3 weeks maybe, 4 weeks, a month. And then we were all wondering when we were going to get to go to cadet school, aviation cadet school. And we found out that they really didn't need pilots. They had too many pilots already. But they had to find some way of getting you out of pilot training, legitimately, I guess. So they began giving us depth perception tests at night. They'd wake us up in the barracks, 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes, 1 o'clock, sometimes midnight, and march us down to this building where they gave all kinds of, they had all the different equipment for eye testing. And I guess the third or fourth time, I think I flunked the depth perception portion of the test. And the other guys had flunked something else, they wouldn't pass something else. And they're just using it as an excuse to get you out of pilot training. And then you had an option to go into gunnery school or radio training. And they needed gunners. So I was immediately then sent, after I failed this depth perception test, I was sent to gunnery school. And they sent me to Tyndallfield, Florida, along with a bunch of other guys. And I can't remember why we went there. I think we were going to go to gunnery there, but for some reason they must have been full or something. But we were there like a week, and then they sent us from there to Buckingham Army Air Base in Fort Myers. So we went through gunnery school there, Fort Myers.
When was that?
Oh, that was 1944, 1943. That was the late summer of 1944. And Buckingham Army Air Base is sort of a neat place. It was hot then, and hurricane season and so forth, but we never saw any hurricanes. But they had an unusual setup there where you'd ride in a truck in the back end of a vehicle, and they had like shotguns mounted on the side of the truck, the vehicle. And you'd ride around through this area, wooded area, and then they'd shoot pigeons from these little huts. And then they had different, 1 rad, 2 rad, 3 rad, which is the different angle that you shoot at. 3 rad spot was the most difficult. That was like at a 90-degree angle. So it was, with a bird flying and at that angle, it was hard to hit. And we did that, but then we also had to we had to work one of those huts 1 day a week. And it was sort of miserable because with mosquitoes, it was like the jungle down there. And I found the first time I went, I got the 3 rad hut, which was the most difficult. And these pigeons, they were like what do you call those things you throw?
Like frisbees, like the clay discs?
Yeah, a clay disc. But anyway, I found out that by accident that if a truck came at a certain, because they all went at the same speed, so if I let it go at a time when this truck got at a certain place, if they missed it, it would go right through the back end of the truck, and the guys would hit the deck, because these things could really hurt when they hit you, if you didn't, by any chance they did, So that became a game for me. I thought I was having all kinds of fun because I knew when a truck got to that spot, I'd let it go, and I'd just wait because 9 times out of 10 they'd miss it. and then the thing would go plowing right through the back of the truck, and they'd all dive on the floor, and I'd be laughing. So that sort of made it fun for me to do that. Otherwise, it was work because it was hot. The place would be 90 degrees, 100 degrees maybe. But the training was really good. We learned a lot about all the enemy aircraft the Germans had and the Japs had. We had to identify every plane, every fighter type plane, even bombers too, but mostly fighters. And what happened would, they have it's like a video store, with video games. Mm-hmm. They'd have planes come flying across the screen, and you had like a imitation gun, machine gun, and they came very quickly. All the different fighters, like the Luftwaffe, and Messerschmitt 109 was the main fighter the Germans had, and the Zeros and even British fighters, and of course all our fighters, and they just kept going across the screen, and you had to shoot them, and you didn't have much time, maybe a second, to make a decision. And obviously, if you didn't shoot the right plane, you'd be in trouble, in terms of your scoring. So that was interesting, and we all got pretty good at it. Where, they'd run a P-51 across and a Zero across right after it, and if you shot the P-51, obviously, they're gonna flunk you out of school if you do that too much. And then they had a lot of training on weapons, like we, of course, were going to be using 50 caliber machine guns. We had to tear those down and put them back together, blindfolded with gloves on, eventually. Same way with an M1 rifle. And we had to be able to do the same thing with a 45 weapon. Then we trained a lot of practice of firing the weapons, obviously, at targets. And that was like 8 weeks, I think, about 8 weeks training. And then we got a furlough. I got on a train and went home for a week.
Before you went home on your furlough, did you get to go up in the air while you were there? Still
never was on an airplane.
They were still just training.
I'm on a lot of trains.
What was it like? What was it like to go home?
Oh, it was cool to see my mother and father and my sisters. My brother was in the service, and he was in New Jersey before he went to Washington. But it's always nice to go home after being away. I saw a few friends, but most of the guys I knew were all, they were in the service, not home anyway. So after a couple of days, it got sort of old, and I was anxious to get back. So then I took a train from there, from Greenville to Chicago, and then we went to I had to be in Tonopah, Nevada, at Tonopah Army Air Base. That was a crew training for B-24s. So that was a long ride to get to Tonopah. Tonopah is a little town in the middle of Nevada. In those days, I understand now it's modernized a lot, but in those days they didn't have paved streets at all. It was a dumpy place, I thought. All they had is a bunch of bars in town and a couple of gas stations. And Tonopah Air Base was about 11 miles, I think, outside of town. And so we had our crew was put together there.
Do you remember the names of the men in your crew?
Some of them, yeah. Jack Harris was our captain. A guy by the name of Graham was a co-pilot. The belly gunner was Shorty. Peterson, I think was his last name. He was about 5'6", I think, 5'5", little short guy. And Chuck Annis was a waist gunner. The others I can't really. Saperstein was a bombardier, I remember him. The bombardier was he was a little short man, very young. He was like 18 years old. The other guys were all old. I mean, I thought they were old. They were like 25, something like that, 24, 25 years old. But anyway, they put our crew together and we started training. And that was the worst, probably the worst part of my experience in the Air Corps was at Tonopah.
And why was that?
Like I said, the town was dumpy and there wasn't anything to do, but of course all we did is train anyway. But they had a lot of the permanent party. They call guys that were mechanics, that people were there permanently. Were permanent party guys. There were women too. And they hated being there. At least not everybody, but I'd say 90% of them hated to be stationed there because it wasn't anything to do for them but their job. And it reflected in the maintenance of everything you use, including the aircraft. You know, we flew, I don't know how many times we flew 24s there, 200 or 300 times probably. We were there for nearly 3 months, I think 2.5 months maybe. But we had to bail out once because both engines got caught afire on number one, number two engines caught afire at the same time. We thought it was going to blow up. So Jack told us to get the heck out. And then I broke a bone in my foot when I lit on the side of a mountain. But we all got out okay, fine. Nobody got hurt. I was the only one that got hurt. And I broke a foot and I was had a cast on my leg for a week or so. And then, but we were, the training was really good. They had firing ranges, bombing ranges, and 24 has a little, I don't think that model shows it, but it's got a camera hatch in the back underneath before you get to the tail turret. And we used to take pictures of when we have high altitude bombing missions at night. It'd be about 27,000 feet, something like that. And so they had a great big circle, huge. It had to be a mile in diameter probably, in the desert. This is at night, like 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And we had to, in the back, either one of us, the two waist gunners or myself. Usually the turret gunner belly gunner didn't do it, but Jack, he didn't like. He was a little short guy I talked about. He had trouble holding the camera because this camera was huge that you had to hold. And what we did was open the camera hatch, and that's what they call it, the camera hatch in the back. And you put your one foot on each side, and you lean over and hold. You had to hold this camera. Well, you couldn't have a chute on. The chute snapped. Chutes were separate. You didn't wear a chute. You wore a harness. And then the chute was hanging on the side of the fuselage, the plane. So that if you ever when you had to get out, you had to grab your chute and snap it on and then get out. But they had this camera, and I'd lean over it. I think about it now, it'd make me, get woozy. But I'd put my foot on either side of that camera hatch with it open and lean over, and when they let the bombs go, I'd take pictures see how accurate the bombardier was. Mm-hmm. And I often think of, if I'd have made one little slip, I'd have done history. It'd just fall out. But so we did that, and then we used to. They'd pull they'd pull a long chute on another airplane. I really forgot what it was. Some kind of a military transport, I think. They'd pull a long chute, and then we'd practice. We'd shoot at the chute. And they had colored tip caliber 50 bullets, so that they could tell which guy hit, if you hit it, who it was, you know. Like a tail turret guy, I was always red, and somebody else would be blue and so forth. And we used to try to cut the cable rather than shoot at the chute. We always, you know, we sort of thought that was a bunch of baloney, you know, to do that. So we all tried to cut the cable that was pulling the chute, but nobody ever did. And we do that kind of stuff, and we had a lot of training again, we went through maintenance training on weapons and so forth, and taking the caliber 50 guns apart, and they deliberately screw up the ammunition so it wouldn't work, and then you had to fix it, you know, little things like that. But we had really a good crew. In fact, our crew won crew of the class when we graduated from crew training.
What does that mean?
Means that you accomplished all they keep records of everything you do. And we flew the most high altitude bombing runs, and the accuracy of the bombing was superior to any other crew that was going through there at that time. And, you know, stuff like that. Every time, the worst thing, I darn near lost the whole thing for him, because this was in November. Yeah, it was in November, and it was cold. Tonopah, 6,000 feet higher than Denver. All kinds of mountains around. And we were landing, it was a nighttime high altitude deal, bombing mission, dropping bombs. And it must have been 1 o'clock in the morning when we landed, after dropping the bombs and everything. And what you had we wore electrically operated suits, heat suits. And they're heavy. There were heavy jackets and pants and boots that plugged in to connect to each other. And when we landed, you had to check those out when we went up, and check them in when we got down. And it was a building where they had a long hut type building where you had to check the stuff in at a window. So you had to stand outside. You know, it's zero out with a wind blowing. And it was cold. So we wanted to get in as quick as we could once we landed, to check our equipment in and get back to the barracks. And well, when you land, you have to go through a bailout drill. So what you do, the captain would pull up in the area where they parked the airplanes, and once he got the plane parked in the right space, he cuts the engines, and then he rings a little bell, and everybody jumps out. You have to get your chutes, which you check out before you leave, till you had to check your chutes out. So you had to grab your chute, put your chute on, after the bell rang, jump out where you're supposed to jump out. In our case, we went out the camera hatch in the back. And it was just a routine that we did every time we landed. And, well, this particular night, it was really bad. I mean, the weather was, a storm had started to blow in, started to snow, and it had to be 5 degrees below zero, at least it felt like it. So this other kid, Jim Annis, and I said, let's get the heck out of here, you know, before he cut the engines. So what happens on the 24? Before he cuts the engines, he revs them up. When he revs the engines up, the tail goes up. So the tail is like 12 feet above, 10 or 12 feet up high. And then when he cuts the engines, then it drops down. So it's only maybe 6 feet, something like that. And so we wanted to get out. So while the captain was still gunning the engines, he jumps out. I go out right after him. And I'm in a rush to, and apparently the handle of my parachute, it has a red handle you pull. Well, the red handle got caught on a latch on the door. And of course, as soon as my body got out of the airplane, the prop wash blossomed my chute and blew me like at least 200 yards down the parkway where the planes were. I didn't even know what happened. It happened so fast. I mean, it just instantaneous. And of course, needless to say, the captain was a little upset with me, and because we shouldn't have done that, obviously. And I got called before the colonel in the base, and he went up one side of me and down the other for a half hour. I've never had my father or anybody else go after me like he did, calling me an idiot and, how did you ever get in the Air Corps kind of thing. It was, of course, I could have been killed real easy because the planes were, there's a bunch of planes coming in. And what happened is the way we pulled in, it was the last one in this row so that there wasn't any airplane behind me. And had there been planes behind me, it would have blown the chute right into our props and wound me up like a spindle. And I'd have been dead. So I was real lucky that didn't happen. But anyway, we did manage to get crew of the class, regardless of that incident, which is pretty good.
So now, were you both held accountable, or just you because your chute opened?
He got held accountable, but not as bad as me. Okay. He didn't get called before the colonel. I was the one that got called before the colonel. Then we finally, when we graduated from Tonopah, we were never so happy as to get out of there, that place. And we went to Salinas, California, which was a POE for the Air Corps. And there were 50 crews that went there. And we got, I can't remember whether it was then or after. I guess it was afterwards we got a furlough. Yeah. Yeah, we got selected to where we were going to go. And the first 25 crews went to the South Pacific out of there, and we missed it by one crew. In other words, I was in the group, the 25 groups that went to England, and we found out later that most of those guys never came back that went to the South Pacific because 24s. If you ever had a ditch of 24 in the water, your chances of surviving are very little because they break in half right at the waist. Typically, they'll break in half when they ditch. Where 17s, you could do anything to them, it seemed. But anyway, I was real lucky then because we got to go to Europe. So we got a furlough then. 2 weeks, and I got on a train again. That's the thing that drove us buggy. We went by train everywhere. We never got to fly anyplace. So I had to take a train the whole way to Chicago and then back to Greenville, and I was home for a couple of weeks, which was great. And my mother was a basket case though because she knew I was going to be going overseas. But then I got to get on a train and go the whole way back to Salinas, California again. And when we got back to Salinas, we sat around for 10 days doing nothing because we really wouldn't have had to have been there except our papers said we had to. But we got anyway, after 10 days, we got on a train again, and we go the whole way to New Orleans and on a troop train. And no sleeping facilities or anything. You sit up in a hard booth-like thing. And go to New Orleans and up to Fort Dix, New Jersey, New York area. And, we were there, I think maybe 5 days, something like that. And, got on a troop ship and headed off for England.
Was that still winter, or was that the spring of 45?
No, that was in March of 1945. So, and we were worried because there were still U-boats around in the Atlantic, and we didn't have any escorts at all. We went over, troop ship went over by Ile-de-France, went over by ourselves, and they zigzagged the whole way. So every 7 minutes, the ship zigzagged. But apparently that prevented U-boats from getting a bead on you to send torpedoes. And we didn't believe it worked. So, first couple of nights I think I wasn't the only one. I was sitting around waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. The weather was terrible. Oh, also, then my brother came up from Washington when I was there, and we were able to go into New York City, and I'd never been in New York City before. So we went in and sort of did the town, which is sort of nice, and I saw him. But I never forget when we passed the Statue of Liberty, leaving, I got a funny feeling that I'd never come back. I don't know why, I just had that feeling. And, but it took us, I think, 8 days to go across. It was rough. Well, not all the time, but maybe 3 days. It was very, very choppy, heavy seas. And a lot of guys got sick. I came real close to getting sick a couple of times, but I didn't. They had, one thing I'll never forget is they had a bunch of Marines on the ship going over there, and they all had Mohawk haircuts. You know what those are? Mm-hmm. Where they're just a strip down the middle. Mm-hmm. And they were a bunch of rough characters. But anyway, they had the officers' mess hall. Right off of it, they had all kinds of real good fruits, apples, oranges, all that kind of stuff. And they'd had trouble with people stealing, guys stealing and stuff, so they had a guarding it. And somebody killed them to get fruit, fresh fruit. And it turned out to be one of the Marine guys. They caught him. I don't know what happened to him, but they just killed a guy with a knife to get fruit, which is sort of. We were all put in our beds in our bunk area and weren't allowed to leave for like half a day until they finally found the guy that did it. That was a sort of a rough thing to happen. But anyway, we landed in England. Another thing I should mention, that we were always separated from, talking about segregation between enlisted personnel and officers. We were always there. We never went in, up until that point, we never went out with our crew, as a whole crew. Just the enlisted guys were together, the officers were together. They had officer mess hall. We didn't eat the same place they did. They had officers club. Enlisted men had their place. You could go in, the PX officers would be in. You could run into them, but you couldn't fraternize with them at all. Even our own crew, our own captain, co-pilot, bombardier, navigator, never could. And that happened even in England. We had separate barracks, separate eating facilities, everything else from the officers. And But we landed I think it was Southampton, England, and got on a train. Now, British trains were unreal, those compared to ours. Those things, I think they probably go 80 or 90 miles an hour. It seemed like it anyway. We got on a train and went up to where we were based. It's called a little town called Swaffham. That's 100 miles north of London. And it was 8th Air Force, of course. And 8th Air Force was comprised of 3 divisions. 1st and 3rd divisions were all B-17s, and 2nd Air Division was B-24s. We were attached to the 491st Bomb Group, 855th Bomb Squadron. Each bomb squadron had 4 planes, 4 B-24s and crews. And so it was North Pickenham, I think was the name of the base. And they had little Quonset huts that we lived in there. And of course we were the rookies, just getting in and meeting the guys that have been that so-called, they were veterans. They'd flown a bunch of missions. A couple of them had actually flown. One guy you always hear this business about 35 missions or 30 missions and so forth. This guy had flown 65 missions. But he volunteered, he wouldn't go home. And I think he had 4 or 5 Purple Hearts, and, just unreal. But those guys, they were veterans, and of course we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know where the mess hall was and all that kind of stuff, because we got in there like 7 o'clock at night and hadn't eaten or anything. So they were sort of helping us along with everything. And the Germans then were sending, they had a rockets. They were real close to getting airplanes in. And in fact, they had some, but they weren't very effective. But they had a rocket, a V rocket, that they were shooting over England, but they didn't know where the heck it was going half the time. Their control mechanisms weren't very good. But anyway, we had bunkers outside the Quonset huts, and the guys told us, it was cold then too, and they told us, when the sirens went off, when the air raid sirens went off, you're supposed to get out of bed and get in the bunkers outside. Mm-hmm. We don't do that. That's a bunch of garbage. Don't pay any attention to it. So I had a bunk. I guess I got to bed about 11 o'clock the first night. And I had a bunk, an upper bunk, or up and down bunk. Mm-hmm. And I had an upper bunk. And I couldn't have been they turned the lights out. I think it was 11, I can't remember, but turned the lights out. And at times you couldn't have any lights at all, but little pen type lights. And I was in the bunk, and I hear the air raid siren goes off. And the guy said, there it goes again, Joe, or something, and they're not going to get out. So I'm lying there, waiting for something to hit, a bomb to blow us out of the place. And of course, we hear airplanes. And I didn't know that the Germans were sending any airplanes over there. Well, it turns out, in retrospect, looking back afterwards, we found out that those were some British Spitfires that happened to be flying around. And they were just waiting for this to happen. But the reason the thing went off was because they sent some rockets over the area. I guess they were aiming at London, and they were 100 miles off beat. But anyway, I'm lying there, I was scared. Mm-hmm. And I guess 2 of their guys, one on, I don't know, you probably aren't familiar with Quonset huts, but they're like corrugated metal and going in and out, in and out, in and out, corrugation. They had steel bars. Each of them had a steel bar, and they ran the whole length of the Quonset hut on each side. And it sounded I can't even describe it. It's like somebody was firing a machine gun right in your ear. It sounded that loud. Just unreal. And I thought I was dead, you know. I hit the door before, I think I hit the door before I hit my feet on the ground, getting out. And all the guys they were right behind me. Just scared to death. It was so bad. And
How many men?
And they were laughing their heads off afterwards.
How many men did each hut hold? How many of you were trying to get out?
30, 35. They go out each end. They had exits on each end. But it was a practical joke they pulled on us. And they were always short-sheeting our beds and, you know, pulling stuff like that on us. And we went through a lot of orientation there, and Pickham was very nice, and little town of Slaughton was really cool. It was a nice town, and the British people just were wonderful. And you couldn't be treated nicer. And of course, then it was, by the time we got through the orientation and so forth, it was April, probably the second week in April. All the guys in there were flying. We weren't flying. And they'd give us stories, you know, because we had to go through all this orientation stuff. And so by the time, I can't remember the date. I think it was like the 13th of April, something like that, is when we flew. We flew one mission we went to outside of Salzburg, Austria. This is a long ride. And the weather wasn't good. They had been having bad weather there, really bad weather. And with cloud cover over target areas, and they'd end up scrubbing emissions and so forth. So, but we flew the first one, and it wasn't enough. I was so disappointed because you have all this training on weapons and, you know, 50 caliber machine guns, all this kind of stuff, and all the training had nothing to do. I'd sit in the turret, you know, just look around. We always had to be ready, you know, in case you ever did see an enemy fighter plane, but I never saw one because the Luftwaffe was gone by that time. They started going out of business in March of 1945. And anyway, so you just sit and take a ride the whole way, you know, 6-7 hours round trip, maybe even close to 8. And the only time we had a problem was when they dropped the bombs. We'd be about 27,000 feet is all. Of course, then, you know, on 24s or 17s too, there's no pressurization. You use oxygen. When you get to 10,000 feet, you have to put oxygen masks on. And it's cold, really cold. You couldn't touch anything. If you took your glove off and tried to touch a gun, a machine gun or something, your fingers would stick to the gun. You'd lose the skin off your fingers. So you couldn't touch anything. Anyway, we get to the target area, and all you did is saw some flak. Never saw an enemy. And I was just so disappointed I didn't have a chance to shoot at anything. But that was the only bad part. Is right over the target area. We got quite a bit of flak, and you felt so helpless because you just sat there and see all these little black puffs of smoke popping around. And you knew if they hit you, why, it'd be trouble, but we never got hit, that I know of anyway. And then you just let the bombs go, turn around, go home. Never saw any, like I said, never saw any fighters. And so then the next, I can't remember exactly, maybe 3 flights were scrubbed. What they do is we take off, usually take I can't remember, either 2 or 3 24s go off at a time. And then we meet over the channel and form your formations. And they flew real tight formations. I mean, we have usually 3 planes, and you'd have a 24 with those wings stuck. Sometimes they even stick them inside of our wing, flying. They want to keep close together, but we didn't do too much of that. The first time we went, we did that, but then afterwards, because there wasn't any enemy flak until we got to where we were dropping the bombs. Fly mostly over France or Germany. There's nobody shooting at you.
So you never had a fighter escort?
Oh, that's right. But then we had, I think, the next 3 times we went up were scrubbed. Once we didn't even get out of the plane. We got in the plane before we even moved it off the taxi place. And the next couple of times we went over and started the formation over English Channel, and they scrubbed it, because of weather. So the weather that time was just terrible. And it just seemed like it rained every day. And then we flew 2 more towards, I think it had to be like middle of April, towards the end of April. We went to Munich both times. And they were dropping bombs on, one was marshalling yards, but then the other one was they had a factory where they made the fuel for the V rockets the Germans were shooting. So they were bombing those. And so I didn't really see any combat at all, just ride along. And then the war ended, I think it was May 7th. And then we went to London. That's the only time that we ever got together as a crew, is when the war ended. All 10 of us went to, on a 24, there's 4 officers and 6 enlisted guys. And all 10 of us went to London to celebrate. And that was pretty cool, too. Talcott Square, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but we were there, and everybody was, drinking in the streets, and girls would come up and grab you and give you a kiss, which was sort of nice. And we had a good time. I didn't drink then, but I'd drink soft drinks. But then the second day, we stayed overnight, and the second day, like the kid, I can't remember his name, he's a bombardier. He's our age. He's a second lieutenant. And he made me drink a scotch and water, and challenged me to do it, so I did it, and I got sick. And that's the only time I had a drink, I think, when I was overseas. But then we went back to our base. We stayed in London 2 nights. And the bomb damage was just terrible. You wonder how those people went through what they did. So we went back to our base and got ready to go home. And we did fly our own plane back. Excuse me. I think it was 7 days. We got up in the morning, had everything packed on the plane, and then had to take it off and go back to the hut because it was scrubbed because of weather over the Atlantic. But in those days, you just didn't fly back to the United States. When we did leave, we went to Iceland. That was the first stop in Iceland, and that was a long ride. In fact, we were very concerned about the competency of our navigator. Not that he wasn't competent, but because if he'd have screwed up and we missed Iceland, we'd probably have to ditch him in that area and be dead. But he hit it right on the nose, and we were all giving him high fives. It was a big deal, and we stayed overnight in Iceland, and I had myself and another kid, I can't remember that was one of the gunners, I can't remember his name. We had to sleep on the plane overnight because they were having trouble with permanent party people stealing stuff off the plane. We had all our belongings, you know. So we had to sleep on the plane, so I wake up and I didn't have a watch for some reason. I can't remember why, but I didn't have a watch. I figured out, well, gosh, it's got to be time. I was hungry. It had to be time to go get chow. And the sun was up and everything. And I get up, and they told us before where the mess hall was. So this other kid and I take off. We were going to take off, and they said, oh, well, you know, somebody still might come. So he stayed there. I said, I'll go eat and then come back, and then you can go eat. And I got to the mess hall, and there was MPs around there. And, what are you doing here? And I said, I'll get something to eat. He said, we're not open. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And I hadn't realized it, you know, but there the sun was up. You know, it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. And so I went back and got some more sleep. And,
John, this is a model of a B-24 similar to what you flew while you were in the service.
yes.
Explain to me, if you can, what the different gunner positions are and where people would be stationed in the plane.
Yeah, sure. I was a tail gunner, obviously, riding in the back in the tail. This is a turret that turns up and down in both directions. And then at the waist, there's a window on each side with a 50 caliber machine gun in each window. And those are in locked positions so that obviously you can only turn it so far each way because you don't want the gunners taking the tail off or the wing off. And then you got a belly gunner, that's a Sperry turret underneath. So the belly gunner there, so that's 3 gunners there. And you have a top turret gunner in the front of the plane. These are the guys that, you know, tail gunners were in a bad position, but these guys got killed a lot because of ME-109 Messerschmitt fighters typically attack from the front. They'd be coming in this direction, and these guys got hit an awful lot in that top turret. And then, of course, your main cockpit there with the pilot and co-pilot, and the bombardier usually sat in a little office, like an office area behind him, along with the navigator. And the top turret gunner, is it? Yeah, that's the top turret gunner. Mm-hmm. He's another one that's very vulnerable too, that guy.
And
He usually was a radio operator as well as the gunner.
each plane held how many men?
10. Yeah, 4 officers and 6 gunners and a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and bombardier. Yeah. The name of our plane is Jigs Up, and it's not a very good picture. We picked that plane up once we got over to England, to North Pickham. It was assigned to us. This photograph, I'd never had a picture of the actual plane. I didn't have a camera when I was over there even. And when I was at the Veterans Administration going through a program here in Chicago, my instructor at the Blind Center asked me what, she knew I was on B-24s, and she, over in England, she asked me what the name of our plane was, so I told her, Jigs Up. And about 2 hours later, she calls me into her office, and I go in, and here she showed me this, which was our actual plane that we flew. And she got it off the internet somewhere. I thought that was sort of cool.
What happened after you left Iceland?
Then we left Iceland. It was just a matter of going that far and stopping and refueling. And then we went, and I can't remember whether it was Greenland or Labrador was the next stop. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the sequence. But anyway, we left England, went to Iceland, I think Greenland, then Goose Bay, Labrador, and then we landed in Bradleyfield, Connecticut. So it took us 3 days, 3 full days to get back, to fly back. And so we landed in Bradleyfield and got a 2-week furlough. So I took a train home from New York to Greenville, went from Bradleyfield down to Connecticut, down to New York City, and got a train there to Greenville. And I think I got 2 weeks furlough then. And then we went to Wenatchee, Washington, where we had to report. So I took a train to Chicago and to Wenatchee, Washington, which is right in the center of the state of Washington. And I can't remember the base there. We weren't there very long. And then we were sent from there to, from Wenatchee to Spokane, Washington. That's on the east edge of the state of Washington. And we were there only like a week or 2 weeks at the I don't even remember the name of the air base there. Mm-hmm. And then we moved from there to McCord Field, which is in Tacoma, Washington.
When was that?
That was in June of 1945. The Pacific War was still on. Mm-hmm. And they were going to form Jimmy Doodle's 8th Air Force on Okinawa. And we were going to be sent to B-29 school, and that was someplace in California. It was a newer type airplane, bomber, much larger, and it had central fire control and so forth, a lot of stuff that we'd have to go to school on to learn. And so we were going to go there, and then they dropped the atomic bombs in September, and that was it. The war was over. So we were at McCord Field, and that was sort of frustrating too, because we just had nothing to do except wait to get discharged. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I could ever figure out is there were so many guys ahead of us that were going to get out that we just had to wait. So I was at McCord Field from September. I forgot when I got there. Maybe even before that, yeah. Must have been August of 45 until I finally was discharged in April of 46.
Were you on a point system? Is that why you didn't have enough points to go home?
I'd heard guys mention that before, and I can't remember points. I must have been. I don't really recall that. All I know is we couldn't figure out why we couldn't get sent over to Fort Lewis and get our papers and go home. Mm-hmm. But I think I told you earlier, I played on the base basketball team at McCord Field, and then also played on the baseball team. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the whole season because I got out in May. Mm-hmm. But it was all spring I played there. That was at McCord Field, Washington. The time that we were stationed there, there was nothing to do, so I played on the base basketball team. We had a pretty good team. And I think he played some pro ball, but back in those days, professional baseball or professional basketball was nothing. I mean, if you made $10,000 a year, that was a lot of money. We played, I can't remember, maybe 15, 20 games, something like 15, 16 games, I think. But we play universities, like we play Washington, we play Washington State, we played a couple of teams from California, a team from Nevada. I think we played San Diego State, and we only lost like 2 games, but thing is, the kids we played were, 18-year-old kids out of high school. And these guys were all older. I was probably the youngest one. Maybe one other guy was my age, two others maybe. But these guys were older guys. And three of them, either three or four of them were permanent Air Force guys. They'd been in the Air Corps for like 5 or 6 years, something like that.
And then here's your baseball team.
Yeah, and then in the spring I played the bass. I tried to write names, but this stuff is all worn out. But that was our baseball team. They call it the Plainfield Bombers. I played second base for them. But we also had a good ball team. There was one of the guys played with it in the Cardinals system, and another kid that was a pitcher. I think he already, he had a contract with the Cleveland Indians as soon as he got out. And the worst part of the whole deal was we did a lot of things there too, I might add, with the crew, with the officers, that we never had done before when we were in England. We'd go out together and eat in restaurants and stuff like that, where we could afford it. And they didn't have fast food places then. We went skiing at Mount Rainier. Tacoma is located close to Seattle. That was a lot of fun, skiing on Mount Rainier. And we did things as a crew. And like I said, Jack, our pilot, Jack Harris, was just a fantastic guy. Couldn't ask for a nicer human being. And he had always wanted to, he told us all kinds of stories about how he tried to bribe people to keep him from getting washed out of fighter pilot school because he wanted to be a fighter pilot so badly. And he ended up being a bomber pilot. He lived in Norfolk, Virginia, and married and had two kids, a little boy and a little girl. And one of them, I think the boy, if I remember right, he'd just seen when we came back. We got a furlough when we came back. It was the first time he'd seen him. And anyway, like I said, Jack was, our captain, was checked out on I didn't say that, but he's checked out on P-38, which is a twin fuselage fighter. It was the fastest fighter plane we had, 400 miles an hour. We couldn't imagine a plane going that fast. Mm-hmm. And so he was checked out on the 38. And then in those days, the pilots had to fly 4 hours a month in order to get flight pay, which was quite a bit, an increase in their salary. So he was checked out on the 38. So he was, the day before we were getting our discharge papers over at Fort Lewis, we're going to be bussed over to Fort Lewis, which was close by. And he was flying out 38 in his final time in, and his wife and two kids had been driven the whole way from Norfolk back to Spokane, or back to Tacoma. And then they were going to go home with him. Well, something happened on the landing. I never did hear whether it was pilot failure or mechanical failure, but got himself killed. And all of us took that awful hard. And, we'd been through quite a bit together. And to have it happen like that, was hard to accept. And even then, I guess I wasn't really deeply religious, but, I was asking God how could that happen? How could you let something like that happen?
It must have made it hard to leave the next day.
Pardon?
Was it hard to leave the next day? Was it hard to get on that bus?
It was very hard. Yeah. But we didn't have any choice. We just had to go. So, but we were glad to get out, and We were offered an option of staying in the service, and I didn't want to do that. And we, another kid and I hitchhiked the whole way back to Chicago. We got a ride. It was funny. We got the second car that came back was a big Cadillac, and the salesman. And he stopped and picked us up, asked where we were going, and we said, I've forgotten, maybe it was even Denver, we said, because we figured nobody would be going very far. And it turned out he was going the whole way to Chicago. So we rode, this kid was from St. Louis. So we both went, we got a ride the whole way to Chicago, and then I took a train home from there. And he took a train home to St. Louis. So.
You didn't want to get on another train back?
No, I didn't want to ride a train the rest of my life. That was a funny thing, is being in the Air Corps and spending most of my time on trains.
What was it like to come home?
It was great. It was, my brother was home by then. He'd been discharged. And, but we were never that buddy-buddy, because of the age differential. My sister had gotten married, Pat, and of course, actually all of them had gotten married. But, I didn't have any camaraderie, so to speak, with my brothers and sisters in terms of doing stuff together because I was a little brat, so much younger than the others. So.
By the time you got back, you must have been one of the last to return. Had a lot of your schoolmates and everything already arrived?
Pardon?
Had a lot of your schoolmates already returned?
I think most of them did, although there was a couple of guys that hadn't gotten out yet. And a couple of others had re-enlisted, even after the war was over. But it was good to see them, and of course then I wanted to go to college and took advantage of the GI Bill, so I went right into school. Started in the fall.
And where did you go to college?
Well, it's a little liberal arts college, and I was another kid, and Johnny Bolivar was his name. Excuse me. He and I were sort of jocks. We played a lot of ball and football and stuff, and we'd gotten a scholarship offer for the University of Florida in Gainesville, and we were going to go there. And my mother and dad just went ballistic, and his mother and dad were the same. We were close friends. Having been away Johnny was away a little longer than I was. He was in the Marine Corps in the South Pacific. And you can't go away from home to school now. You've been away for over 2 years and all this garbage. So we finally conceded and said, okay, we're going to go to, because we had our college paid for anyway with the GI Bill, so scholarship didn't mean that much. So we'll go to Teal College, which is a local school, small liberal arts college, but very nice. Mm-hmm. They were noted for having very good football teams there. And so we agreed to, we'll go there 1 year and then we'll transfer. And that's what we did. And then we ended up having an undefeated football team our freshman year. Back then you could play ball when you were a freshman. Mm-hmm. And we had of course in those days, all the veterans were coming back, and they were 22, 23 years old as freshmen in college, and pretty big guys, and much more mature than typically you'd get where you were getting kids right out of high school to start in college. Anyway, we had an undefeated team our freshman year, and we liked it so well, we decided, well, we'll try another year. So we never did transfer. He didn't either, and we both graduated from there.
What did you do after college?
I went to graduate school at University of Pittsburgh. I wanted to be a coach and a teacher. And in those days, I learned. Eventually, I couldn't earn enough money to teaching to do much of anything. The salaries were just horrendous. And, well, plus when I was in grad school, my GI Bill ran out, so I had to I had to earn money to pay for my graduate work. So I got a job in Pittsburgh doing insurance investigating work. And it got virtually impossible for me to continue school and working at the same time because the job I had was full-time. And it was conflictions with classes and stuff, so I thought, well, I'll just drop out of school for a year and earn enough money to pay for my grad school and then get my master's and I'll be done. But it turned out that while I was with this other company, I got an offer with a glass company in a suburb of Pittsburgh that was very good offer. Twice as much money as I could ever make teaching. So I decided to take that, and then I never went back to finish my master's.
So you mentioned while you were still in the service that you played basketball and you played baseball, and then you played football when you were in college. You got back to baseball eventually? You played baseball?
Well, no, I played baseball. I played basketball and football in college, but they didn't have a baseball team.
Okay.
But I played baseball in the summers locally, in like a little semi-pro type team in Greenville. And another kid talked me into going down to Butler, Pennsylvania, which is down towards Pittsburgh from Greenville. And they were a New York Yankee farm team. And you were going taking tryouts, so I went down and tried out, and they signed me to a contract.
What
and
was
then
that?
That was between my freshman and sophomore year, so I was played ball following my freshman year in the summer.
What was that like?
It was fun.
What was the routine? You would travel around, I'm assuming, on buses?
Oh, yeah. Well, when I got signed in Butler, they sent me to Easton, Maryland, which was an Eastern Shore League. And Butler was C-ball, and this was A-ball, I think, in Easton, Maryland. It was neat. You played, you went everywhere by bus. I got $500 for signing a contract. That was a lot of money back then. And I was an infielder. I played mostly second base, but I played third base sometimes. But I quickly learned that I was just another, I thought I was a pretty big deal, I think, when I first went to Butler, when they signed me. But then when I got with the other guy, with the ball players, I was just another number. There were a lot of good ball players. And that's eventually what made me quit and go back to college. I was second baseman, and there was a kid by the name, I'll never forget his name, Ernie DeFazio. He was a shortstop. And the kid had an arm like a rifle and hit real well. Usually batted over 300. And I was out with a couple of the other guys one night. I think I'd been there like a week. And I said, gee, Ernie, he sure is good. How old is he? And the kid said, oh, I think thought he said 32, either 31 or 32 years old. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. I couldn't believe it. The kid looked like he was my age. Looked like he was maybe 22. And it turns out he was 4F during the war, so he couldn't get in the service. He'd been playing ball since he was 17 years old, professionally. And he'd been in the Cardinal system, I think Cleveland, before I got picked up by New York. And the kid, I was saying to myself, God, if I could only be as good as he is. You know? And he'd been bouncing around in the minors for 10 years and never was good enough to even go to stay in AAA. He'd been up to Newark once, which is AAA for the Yankees at that time. But he lasted one day or something, and that was it. So that's when I played the rest of the season. Well, I played most of that season in Easton, and then they sent me down to Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina in the Coastal Plains League until that season ended. And I asked the guy, the manager, where do you think I'll go next year? And he said, you'll probably go back to Easton. So I went home and said, that's it. I'm going to go back to school. Because I figured if I could only be as good as Ernie, and he's never gone anywhere, there's no point in me trying to. Sometimes I think it'd been fun to try and stay, but I think I made the right decision. I went back to school and finished.
So how did you arrive in Chicago?
Oh, I worked for this glass company in Pittsburgh in sales for 12 years, I guess. 11 years. No, 12 years. And I worked out of Pittsburgh, then they sent me to New York, and I managed their New York office, sales office. And then I came back to Pittsburgh, and then that's where I met my wife up in New Jersey. And then I finally left that company and went with Cop Glass. We made lenses for traffic signals. And I went with a traffic signal manufacturing company out of Los Angeles and managed to open up a new office for them in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, Camp Hill. And then they moved me, after I was there, they had a regional manager's office opportunity in Chicago, so they moved me back to Chicago. And we located in Downers Grove, which is where my wife was from originally. So.
Throughout all of your experiences during the service?
I'm sorry?
Throughout your entire experiences while you were in the service, what stands out to you the most? What did you take away from your time spent? Is there anything that...
I guess probably looking back at it, when our captain got killed, I realized how short life can be, and that I guess it worked in with what my dad always said, is to live every day for the fullest, because you never will know what tomorrow brings. And the fact that, he died that way so quickly in his life. And of course, looking at others, I have other friends that got killed in the war too, that, you better take advantage of everything you can while you're here. And I think maybe that lesson is what I learned. That meant most to me.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. It was truly a fascinating interview.
Well, thank you
and I'm
very
grateful
much.
for your service. And I'm
Pleasure.
grateful that you were here today.
Hope I didn't take up too much time. So.
No, I think it was great.
Okay.
Thank you. For Plainfield Television Group, I'm Tina Beard with the Plainfield Public Library, and this interview with John Bright is going to go into the records of the Library of Congress. Thank you, John, very much for coming in. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.